Welcome to Through the Lens, stories, life lessons, and musings with Amanda LaChapelle and guests. This is a podcast for taking a moment to dive into the most random stories and topics about life, art, and the world we live in. I have Elle Copeland here from Rising Tide. Elle and I made friends, is it 2 years ago? Is that real? Is that right?
Math is really hard, but I think it was 2021.
Okay, it was anyway, point is we met at a work conference since we're both in the same field. And it was like a really short conversation, I feel like, at a lunch table, and then a LinkedIn connection. And then, I was telling you about this person, and you should connect with them because they could help you out with this part of your business. And then, hey, come to this conference. And yeah, I mean, from there, it's been a bit of a wild journey. Welcome, Mel.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So when I thought about making this podcast, I was, I thought, okay, along business lines, I should come up with like exactly what we're going to talk about and have this whole structured thing. And then I went, nah, just like, fuck it. Like, it's not going to happen because I just want to create. And that's the goal. I want to get back to this place of, doing something that makes me, fulfilled in terms of creating. And one conversation I knew I wanted to have was with Elle, because we've talked about something that we share in common. And it's a bit of a weird term, but I don't know if did you come up with that term, or I don't even remember where it came from. But do you remember where we first said that?
What term? I
Bridges.
have to say a lot of things.
Bridges.
Oh, the thing that we were talking about.
Yeah.
I was like, what thing, Amanda? I say tons of stuff.
It's very true.
Yeah, I don't know if building bridges, or if that came from you or me, or if that's just something that is a deep set value of mine. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah. It was an interesting conversation because it's something that I found in my own life. I am, for a lot of people, a bridge, which we'll get into what that means in a minute. And I don't often meet other people like me. And when I do, it's like exciting because like somebody understands what that means. So what does that mean to you when we're talking about this?
So, without getting too nerdy, because I do have a background in engineering, right? And so, designing bridges and structural loading and all of that was obviously important to me. But when I think of building bridges, I think of how I grew up, and I was taught to always be aware of someone who has less than me, who has less experience than me, who has less material than me, and how can I connect with them in a way that lets them not only cross over to my side of the world, but also allows me to learn something from them as well. I think into a lesser, more flexy kind of view, I see myself as just a connector, as someone who has the strength to hold the tension between two ideas and to allow others to kind of cross that bridge and to investigate some of those ideas with me. So I like the idea of a bridge because it thinks of, commerce and exchange of ideas and goods and services. So I think a bridge is pretty apt.
So I kind of loved it because for me, it means similarly, but a little bit different. I had a lot of people that required things of me in my own family life, my own personal life growing up, that were probably beyond what I should have been doing or what my role should have been. And so I just kind of learned that skill of being able to look at everything like a topographical map and kind of figure out where those valleys were and fill in that space and make sure that things were level in whatever way they needed to be, whether that be level because of the circumstance, so like something crazy happening and somebody just has to come in and be the calm one, or whether that was just the nature of the skill set of the people, like you were saying in front of me, adapting to that. And I think we both kind of said something similar. We called it like bridge, like filling a gap, right? Like what's necessary in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how deep I need to get here, but I know very very clearly, a lot of people are like, oh, well, Elle, you're a people person. You're really good at talking to people. And that's a developed skill that I had to develop because my mother was a very quiet person. And so that allowed me to help kind of cross the bridge for her. There's a lot of things that it wasn't something that necessarily came naturally. It was something
Yeah.
that was developed because there was a need in my system outside of myself.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing to kind of get, I guess, not praised for, but like acknowledged for, or be necessary, or come forward as a strength later on when you're like, but that was forged in the fire of something. Like,
You don't know how fucking hard it was to develop this, but if it helps you, that's fine.
yeah, but no, that it came at a bit of a
Yeah.
cost. But that's, I mean,
Yes.
we're laughing about it. I guess that's, I don't know, is that healthy? Probably healthy.
I don't
Um,
know. Laughing helps. Laughing
yeah.
helps.
So like I think about, when so there's so many ways to think about filling gaps. Like you think about it from words, and I know that we're probably similar in this way. So when I see somebody struggling to find words, I'll come in with words that I think they're trying to say to try and like figure out, if I'm on the right path, always in the form of a question. Or if there's a hard conversation to be had, usually falls on me. Would you agree that would be the same for you?
I have learned to not be afraid of hard conversations. I feel like that's the only way that we learn and grow is by taking ownership of things and moving forward. And even if it's not mine, I will take ownership of it. Because if someone has to be the fall guy, let me just fucking do it and get it over with. I don't have I don't have the patience for you to save your pride. Let me go ahead and sacrifice whatever I have because it doesn't fucking matter. Like
Yeah.
let's just do it. So yeah.
I've seen, and I've been on the receiving end of you, when you're challenging somebody, me specifically, and it was I would say you're better at it than I am, even though I think I'm great at it. And it was interesting to receive that back because I'd like to give somebody an example of what this means, right? So like, you have a friend that comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm really excited to start this podcast." And I'm like thinking of dreaming of all these ideas. And do you remember what you said to me?
I don't.
You said, "Okay, so when's the first one booked?" And it was like, yeah, I've got it in the calendar. And I knew that before I even talked to you, instinctively, that you were going to say that to me, because it was one of those things where it was like, all right, I can't just bring the words to her. I have to bring the actions, because she's going to tell me I need to be doing this, and I'm going to have to be accountable for that, which is, I know you're probably laughing because you're like, you just did it without thinking, right?
Yes. I mean, I didn't, it wasn't something that I really thought very much of. I recall now, that being what I said, but I think it's really it's just having the empathy, the experience, and the intuition that you and I are made of the same stuff. And I've had projects before. What did I need in that situation, and how can I extend that to you without being too much pressure? So I want to be supportive of you, and the best way that I can be supportive is to say, all right, how can I make this happen for you?
See,
Yeah.
I loved it because, like I said, I'm usually that person. And one of the reasons why I was so passionate about doing this particular podcast was that I feel like more people have that in them. I just don't think they realize that that's what people need, right?
It takes a great deal of vulnerability. It takes a
Yeah.
great deal of patience and willingness to look silly and to put yourself out there. I was joking earlier about we all have too much pride to put on the line, that we don't want to we don't want to sacrifice it. But in those moments when I asked you, when's the first one booked, I was asking myself, when's the first one for my project booked? And that's a level of, when you want to hold someone else accountable, you are also opening yourself up to being held accountable, because like a bridge, there are 2 points or else it will fail. So in the same way, you have to have the same tension distributed.
And I think too, like, when you think about that, there's like an adage that's saying, teaching teaches you as well, right? And it's like, I feel like whether it's using kinder words or being more supportive, when I'm doing that for other people, right? I'm reminding myself to do that for myself. I'm reminding myself to do that or to ask for that from the people,
Mm.
and look for that from the people around me too, because that's another thing, is that there are other people that maybe could have gotten that message and turned around and said, why is she asking me fucking questions about this? Like, what's her business, right? So like being open and receptive to showing up, people showing up for you the way that you show up is also kind of like a key piece in that. And like, I when I was talking to you, what I want to talk about beforehand was, there's a you just said right now a really key thing is the vulnerability required, right? So like, I know what I do and I know what my process is, but like if you had to give somebody some advice about how you might make somebody feel comfortable enough to do that, or to have that level of transparency, what would you tell people if they're not usually comfortable with that kind of stuff?
Um, well, the first thing that I would say, if someone was coming to me and said, "Hey, I want to show up for my people the way that you show up for yours," the first thing I would say is just practice in small ways. A lot of times, I think you said this just a minute ago, that people want to do this. Everyone's capable of doing it, but how few people actually do it, that is a function of practice. That's a function of, oh, I can't speak into their life. That's a function of, I don't have the right to say this thing, or I don't have my ducks in a row, which no one has their fucking ducks in a row. We
That should
are
be the title.
oh God, dear, where are all my ducks? Where are the ducks? Um, sorry, I got
Okay,
distracted
you're
here.
good.
But so the first thing is practice
Yeah.
in little ways, not just showing up for other people, but showing up for yourself. When I ask that question of when's your first podcast, when's the first one booked, I'm asking myself, when is the first one booked for you, Elle? What are you doing? So the first thing is practice, and the second thing is learning to be comfortable enough with yourself and with your experiences and your intuition to be vulnerable enough to go out there and do those things. I think that often we, it's really easy to tell other people how to do stuff when we are further down the line.
Hmm.
It's really easy to say, well, of course, you just do this. And I think that comes from a place of arrogance and ignorance. And so it's really, really important to be at peace with where you are in your journey. And instead of demanding other people meet you where you are, that you're able to kind of bring that back and bring it with humility, which is one of my favorite words, because it doesn't mean to be made low. Humility comes from the same root word as hummus, as or humus, in
Yeah.
the soil, not the dip, which I guess it could be a dip if you wanted. But it's about getting connected to where you are, where you're rooted from, where you came from, the very thing that grounds you.
Mm.
And so I love that. It's not about making yourself low. It's about making yourself connected.
I think what I hear in a lot of what you're saying and what comes true for me is, I think you have to be really, have to have the best intentions behind what you're doing. Like the intentionality behind what you're doing, it can't be self-serving, because I think, you could say, "Oh, look, they're talking about doing something that could be advantageous to me," or in a, a self-serving way. And really it has to be like when you're talking about meeting them where they're at, it has to be about what's the best thing for them. What's the thing that I'm going to say that could propel them in a way that they need, or that support them in a way that they need. And really consider, the impact of what you're saying. I take it very seriously. It's not something that I do just out of nowhere, when I use my words in this way, because I know that everybody receives communication very differently, right? And when I'm talking to people and I'm having, I ask them a lot of questions about themselves and I'm getting to know them in general, I'm kind of building like a database in my head. And that database isn't made with the intention of exploiting it. It's made with the intention of, if I could be of service, if I could do something kind for them, what would I need to know about them in order to make that a reality, or to approach it in a way that they're going to be able to receive and understand, because we all have different things that mean something to us. So when I think about intentionality, that's kind of, that almost research aspect behind it. Like I don't know about you, but what do you remember about people that you can't even believe that you remember?
Oh, the fact that you like sour keys and I have no context about what those are because I'm an American, a filthy American, and you're a Canadian that has better candy apparently.
Oh, I'll bring you
Uh,
some. They're
you
life
know,
changing.
that there is a lot of research that goes in. I heard a quote this week, and it was that obsession trumps talent every time.
Yeah.
And I work very hard to love the people that I love. And that sounds, I even joked with a partner once. I was like, I'm a better friend than a partner. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're actually getting the short end of the stick by being my partner. I'm a much better friend. Because in friendships, like I feel like I can pour myself out on people with no limits. And to your point about like research, there's a proverb. I grew up very religious, but there's a good number of things that are wise in the Christian Bible, and one of those things is that in the tongue there is power of life and death.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that always sticks with me. Before I say something, words can cut, and you can cut to heal, or you can cut to harm. And I think that it's really important to, as you're talking about intention, it's important to have a bigger picture of what your actions are going to, what you're going to say or what you're going to do, how those are going to impact the person that you're engaged with, because those actions have consequences, and if you don't have the a good answer, a right answer, I struggle with that, because I think that there really aren't a lot of mistakes in the world. But if you aren't confident in what you're doing as helping that person on their way, you've got to be really careful about opening your mouth.
Well, I think that actually brings me to the next part I wanted to talk about, because I think a lot of this has the ability, and it sounds calculating when I describe it this way, but at the office sometimes they will call it moves and counter moves, right? Like I almost see life sometimes when I'm saying these things as a chessboard. The end result isn't me winning. The end result is the person winning, right? But I need to understand how they play in order, back to the research piece, in order to know where I need to go, right? And I think a lot of what you're talking about is actually the foresight to understand what will happen when you do this. Like if you could see 5 moves ahead of where this could go, So how do you, when you're talking to someone, kind of think about it in the terms of, okay, if this is the landscape, where do I need to go? Are you looking for paths? Like what's your process when it comes to that? And I know that's a very vague question, but I think you can handle it.
I listen.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate that that's the answer. But oftentimes people are going to tell you what they need to hear, and they just need you to say it back to them.
Yeah.
Um, I had a mentor once, and she said, people often think the quietest person in the room is the smartest person in the room. And that's something that I took to heart. And I'd like to imagine that I'm smart even though I'm chatty. But everyone is going to tell you what you need to know if you just listen. We talked about the experiences that we had growing up and how we're bridge builders because of, nature and nurture. But really, if you listen, if you're quiet enough, if you listen for certain words and the way that they hold a certain phrase as they say it, you can almost navigate around some of the red herrings and the straw men to actually hear what someone is saying. And often they're saying, I want to be successful. How do I do that? I want to do X, Y, or Z. How do I do that? And oftentimes we're so eager, to your point earlier, we're so eager to do things for our own ego, we miss hearing what they have to say.
Yeah. I love the idea of listening. I'm going to be honest. I don't know. I mean, I'm always listening, but I don't think I always do so with quiet. I'm
Mm.
asking questions, I'm hearing what someone's saying. I think maybe my skill when it comes to this is probably more on the observing the body language, what people tell you that's nonverbal, by how they hold themselves. And I'm terrible at concealing it for myself, but I think that's probably what helps me recognize it in other people. But I always pay attention to, you know, if someone is trying to choose their words and their eyes are moving all over the place, like you can see the thought process, and then you apply the context of what we're talking about, and you might realize that there's something on the line for them or what they're afraid of. And so oftentimes, if they're not saying something, that's when I will jump in with one of those, okay, are you afraid of this? I just want to make sure we take this off the table. We create some psychological safety right now. You could say this ugly thing and I would be okay with it. We would just want to explore it, right? So that
Mhm.
it makes it a little bit easier to kind of get to the root of the problem. Now, maybe sometimes that means I'm inserting that. I don't know. I got to get better. I did say you were further along than I am.
Well, no, and I mean, to your point, that is listening. We communicate in so many ways. We communicate verbally, we communicate physically, and then there's also the space in between where
Yeah.
we're not saying or we're not moving. What does the absence of those things mean? And so, being able to walk in a room and sense the temperature of it is a skill I'm I hate to say proud of because it's a hard won skill. We've talked about this before,
Yeah.
but it's not just about what is being said or being done. It is about the absence of what is being said or the absence of what is being done. So yeah, any sort of communication, it's not just what we say or how we hold ourselves, but the absence of that.
I definitely feel that being able to walk into a room and feel the temperature. And
Mm.
it's something that it's really strange. And I didn't have this in a list of questions, but I will ask you this. Do you find sometimes that it can be actually who like it physically affects you in a way that you may not have been ready for? So like if I go into a room with very negative energy, I don't show up as myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that as humans, we are hardwired for connection. And when you walk into something and the the
The
vibes are
vibes.
off, you walk into something and the vibes are off. It's like, okay, well, I've either got to make the best of this or I need to excuse myself from the situation.
Yeah.
Because when I'm in a situation where I feel uncomfortable and I can't find the balance there, I don't act as my best self, and I don't
Yeah.
like who that person is. I mean, I like her fine. She's fine.
She's okay.
But I like the me who comes up real and transparent the best. So,
Well, it's what feels most comfortable, right?
well, it's
And
easier, yeah.
yeah, and I think, if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking to themselves like, well, this isn't me, right? I guarantee you that you have a bridge in your life, right? You got to look for the person who, just makes your whole like your shoulders release, like you feel comfortable around, and maybe they may not be a bridge to everybody else out in the world, but they're a bridge for you. And I think personally, I recognize those people as ones that kind of take me by surprise, right? If that makes sense. If you've had people like that in your life, Al, what would you say, be a clear indicator that somebody is a bridge? Like what's a characteristic to look out for?
The people that I've seen who have made bridges for me, um, are generous. Uh, so it's not that they're outgoing or that they're introverted. It's that they say my name in rooms that I am not in,
Mm,
and they celebrate with me when I've made a success with as much freeness as you could, just unabashed freedom. The people that have made bridges for me have connected me with friends, with business partners, and opportunities without expecting anything in return. And so the best
mhm,
word that I can have is that they are um, generous, and that there's an easiness to that
mhm,
generosity. I think a lot of times it's you meet people who are generous and something is off about the generosity. They are giving you something, but they are expecting something in return.
yeah,
I think the people who have built bridges for me have given me a space when I felt I didn't deserve it. I think of my friend Stephanie Basie, and she has a PhD in public health, and she is a smart person who's done research on food inequality. And she has connected me with so many people in my community here in Macon, Georgia, that I've become good friends with, just because that's just in her nature, is just to give and connect. And so I'm struggling as I say this. I don't know if it's obvious as I'm halting, because bridges can be abused. I think of Spider-Man. I think of Spider-Man as he's holding, it's in every single Spider-Man movie. He's like holding the bridge, or he's holding the bus back, or he's holding the train back. He's got the webs, and he's holding it in its tension. Like, being a bridge is not an easy thing. It is work. There's joy in work. And so I want to be like, so like, what I really want to say here is, if you need a bridge, be your own bridge. Start doing the work. You can reach out to someone. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Amanda. You can reach out to my friend Stephanie Basie. Don't do that. She doesn't know you're a stranger. But like, the thing that you have to do if you need to be friends with a bridge is to become your own bridge first. Yeah. And that's practice. That's doing the work. I've been in therapy for 5-6 years. I joke a lot that I never read the Harry Potter books as a kid, because I started reading like self-help books when I was 13, because my mom was like, "Oh, Harry Potter's the devil."
My mom said that too.
And so I think that's really what I wanted to say. When you said, how do you find a bridge? I really wanted to say, be your own damn bridge. And again, I don't mean that as, I do actually learn to be generous. Learn to be generous without strings attached. Learn to hold space for people and hold the tension of ideas in a way that allows people to cross the bridge to you, and then you can also go and get ideas and get connections and bring them back as well, so that you are ready and in the right place for the next person.
You're hitting on a core value of mine. So I have like my own personal core values, and one of them is reciprocity. So I have zero problems, as you say, pouring myself out and helping people. But at some point, I'm going to want to come back and hope that, I can have that same level of support. And if I don't get it, maybe the person was in a bad spot at the time. I'm not a keeping score kind of person, but I want to believe that I can do that. I want to believe that it's possible. And, I'll never think about it unless it becomes a consistent thing where I feel like I'm constantly giving. And burnout is real across all different kinds of things, but I think in compassion, especially, you see a lot of the trades that, kind of require that as part of their role, and people burn out for a reason. So like, I think what you're saying, and what I would agree with, is that, if you have somebody like that, okay, you say be your own bridge, and I'm going to say, make sure you appreciate them. Make sure that even if you can't, meet them where they're at and do the same thing right away, maybe you're not capable, maybe you're not in a good spot for it, never take it for granted and just say thank you, right? I'm a big believer of appreciation. For me, that's a form of reciprocity. If I'm not sure how to meet someone back where they've given me, I will always make sure to let them know that I don't take what they've done for granted. I appreciate their time, and I recognize that they didn't have to do that for me. There's nothing on paper saying that they were required to do that. There's no job description. It's just the way that they showed up for me, and I'm incredibly grateful for that.
I mean, I think that's a good point about not keeping score, but that it is important. I mean, if I was to say anything else about the subject, I would say that people like us, people that are bridges, you just talked about burnout. I think it's really important to identify what reciprocity looks like for them, or what even one of the things that I experienced some burnout in a previous job, and I had written above my desk, time, treasure, talent. And I those three things, they're my responsibility. My
Hmm.
time is my responsibility. My treasure, which is how I'm compensated, my legacy, what sort of investments I'm making in the world. That's my treasure. And then my talent is my skill, how I bring that, how I can do things quickly, or I can do things with efficiency or with power. And if at any point in time those three things are out of whack, it's my responsibility to remove myself from that situation.
Yeah.
I might be able to hold on to it for a certain amount of time, but when it's no longer tenable, it's time to go. And so
Hmm.
I think that's something that's really important. Is it's not about, like, you may not burn a bridge. The bridge may just leave. The bridge may just pick itself up and walk somewhere else. And I think it's really important because a lot of times we're told, well, keep going, that sunk cost fallacy, keep working, you don't want to miss out on what this could have been. But, like, if you're not appreciated, if it's not reciprocated, and you feel like you are holding those spider webs on that bus too tight, you've got to let go at some point and
Yeah.
find somewhere else where they actually respect and need you.
I think that's the appreciation piece, right? Like, I love the time, treasure, talent, because like you should always bring at least one, but that appreciation piece is like saying, okay, if I don't have the same skill set as you, I'm going to show up in a different way with time, treasure, talent, whatever the case may be. And I'm going to come to you with something that I have as a capability, because I know that I'm not going to meet you. I don't have that same skill that you do. And I think that's the idea of reciprocity, is it's not that I'm going to show up the exact way that you do. I'm just going to show up for you, whatever that looks like. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this was such a necessary conversation. Maybe these all feel like a form of therapy of what I want to put out there in the world in terms of like maybe how to be a good human. But I think people need to think about this a little bit more, especially in such a digital world where we don't have the same connections as maybe we used to, and you couldn't necessarily see someone's face in the same way to know, whether or not they are burnt out, or they're experiencing, whatever litany of emotions they could be experiencing. Because if we think about our place and how we show up for people, then maybe everything else will be more intentional and the world could be a better place.
I'm in for it.
Thank you so much for your time, Al. We definitely did go over time, but that's okay. It was bound to happen. It was not that much, so.
I'd say written in the stars, definitely.
All right. Thank you so much.